It is episode 3, Sports Industry Insider Meets, and I'm delighted to be joined now by a former Olympic medalist, a creator of 2 of the major sports marketing agencies anywhere on the planet. And if all of that wasn't enough, he also happens to be the director of the London Marathon. It gives me great pleasure to welcome into the conversation Alan Pascoe. Alan, a very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Chris. Lovely to see you again.
It's nice to see you again as well. Yes, it was in very different circumstances that we met for the first time over here in Dubai last year. And it's important that we point out we are discussing the future of major events and the sports agency world over the course of the next half hour, Alan. I think there is only one place to start, and that is by me asking you, are you well during these incredibly unprecedented times?
Very well. I have to say I've rather enjoyed lockdown. I'm fortunate enough to have a lovely garden, and the weather in the last 3 weeks here, as you can perhaps see from the red cheeks, has been amazing. So we've had better weather here than they've had in the south of France. So I've been able to get out, and we've also fostered a dog, which we're now going to own. So that's kept us very busy, very amused, and very well. Thank you.
The life that you have led, personally, professionally, it's an incredible one. From being an athlete to a teacher to setting up, as I said from the intro, 2 major sports marketing houses. When you look back on all of that you've achieved, what stands out for you as numero uno?
I think the way I describe that is that I seem to have led a charmed life. I was a council house kid. I suffered from asthma as a child, in fact, right up into my mid-20s. And yet somewhere in amongst all of that, I managed to get out of the council estate, become an international athlete. As you say, a teacher, then a lecturer, did some TV work. And in between all of that, started in the sports marketing business, or sponsorship as it was called then. And it's been great. It's been great.
What compelled you to set up your first sports marketing agency? What was it about the time, the gap in the market that you saw that you felt there's an opportunity for me to be a success here?
When I was at college as a student, we had an athletics team that took on Oxford and Cambridge, London universities and Loughborough, and all of those had a match against the 3As, which was like an England team. It was one step short of being in the GB team. And I said to the lecturer, my tutor, we should have a match against the 3As. And he said, well, if you can set that up, that'll be great. And so I went off and arranged for the match. We couldn't hold it at the college track. It wasn't good enough. We needed to hire Crystal Palace. So we set a budget of £150, about £10,000 now, I guess, for coaches, buses to take us and the spectators to Crystal Palace, which was the main athletic stadia, and to hire the stadium. And a few weeks later, having discussed it with a few people, I had an offer of £2,800 to sponsor the event, providing we could get it onto television. And I went to the head of sport at BBC, and that was the one advantage of being an international athlete at the time, is that I could actually get in through his door. And he used to talk about this callow youth who appeared and conned him into believing that this meet was going to happen even if television wasn't there, which of course it wouldn't have done because the sponsorship money wouldn't have been there to the same extent. But in the end he said, all right, go on then, I'll give you 20 minutes on Sports Night with Coleman, which was prime time Wednesday night television. We ended up with 48 minutes that night, but when I went back and told the college tutor that, he said, well, you got us into this, you'd better get us out. And so whether I liked it or not, I was in the sports marketing and sponsorship business. And from there, I organised that meeting, and it became the Phillips Night of Athletics. They put a lot more money into it. It became the major Grand Prix meeting in the country. And I was running that and teaching and lecturing at the same time. And from that, it sort of built. I was asked to take on the 3A's event because it was about to fall apart, which was the national championships. I became meeting director for the Coca-Cola meeting, which was the only other major event in the UK. I went for 1 day a week, and at the end of it, they said, would you like to come and join us? We'll give you a piece of the action. I didn't even know what that meant. But anyway, I found out, I joined, and I was in the sports marketing business.
That's an incredible story. It gives us all hope that there is opportunities for us all, because in many respects you kind of fell into it a little bit, and then once you got into it, Alan, give us some of your major wins for anyone watching this. When you look back, what are the kind of major wins? What are some of the events and some of the initiatives that a lot of people might be aware of?
I would be associated with athletics in Britain because I took over when they first got a decent television contract in 1984, which was partly due to myself and Adrian Metcalf, who were commentating for ITV. We convinced ITV that they should bid for the rights, and they got it in 84. And so from that, with basically no income, we turned that into a multi-event contract with ITV, which went out on prime time on Friday nights for an hour on ITV and then switched to Channel 4. It was a huge success, and I think that's what people would know me for. So we've had some great sponsors in there, finishing up with Aviva, going into the 2012 Olympic Games. But along the line, I also set up a number of firsts, which I'm quite proud of. When I first joined the agency that I mentioned earlier, we created the National Fun Run, which preempted the London Marathon. And it showed that people would travel to all come together and to do exercise. It was 2 3/4 miles around Hyde Park, and we got 16,000 people doing that. So we created that. That ran for many years under the Sunday Times. I created the first sponsorship of fantasy football, which we sold into the Daily Telegraph. I didn't create fantasy football, but we sold it into the Telegraph. It boosted their circulation by 120,000, which was amazing, and led to a lot of the other newspapers doing Me Too's. And the Telegraph then took on fantasy cricket. We thought that would put on about 20,000, but it put on 60,000 initially. So it was brilliant.
You mentioned there the London Olympics, hugely successful games back in 2012. If we fast forward to present day, during these unprecedented times, of course the Tokyo Olympics was due to take place this coming summer. It has been moved to 2021. Give us an insight, if you can, Alan, from your experience. What kind of challenges should the organisers expect in moving a Games?
Well, of course, I don't think it's ever happened before. So I think the only people who know that are the people in the front line in Japan at the moment. But I mean, ways that it would affect them are mainly from a budgetary point of view, I would think, because they would have set all their budgets so that the return kicked in pretty quickly at the end of this year, 2020, when the Games should have been held. That's going to all be delayed for 12 months. The selling on of the accommodation that is built for the athletes, which become commercial apartments and houses, and the return on the investment that they've put into the facilities, and actually just transferring all of that on 12 months. Changing all the contracts. There's huge numbers of contracts. I thought the IOC were a bit slow in making the decision to postpone the Games, and then they did then, once they said that they were going to postpone them, come back quite quickly and say it will be for 12 months. Because whilst there are a lot of stakeholders in it, there are only two key ones, and that's the organising committee and therefore the Japanese government and American television, because the games couldn't happen without the huge amount of money that American television put in. Other broadcasters too, but they will usually follow the lead of the US.
Obviously speculating a little bit here, Alan, but I was interested to read over the course of the past 24 hours. They have said, the question was asked, they could not move it again another 12 months if the situation does not improve. And they said, absolutely not. It's 2021 or done. That doesn't surprise you, does it?
No, it doesn't. If you look at it from the point of view of the Olympic associations, the 210, 20 Olympic associations who go to the Games, they already face a situation, particularly those that have winter Olympic teams, where they're going to have a Games in 21, a Winter Games in Beijing in 22, and then the Paris Summer Games in 24. So in 3 years they've got 3 games, and that's a big ask in terms of organisation, in terms of finance, because most of them have to raise money. And the confusion that moving the games on another year would create to the sporting calendar. We're already going to see that. It's going to be a very crammed calendar, I think, in 21, assuming that all of the events survive. Some of them, I think, may go down because there's just not enough money around to keep them going.
Yeah, and obviously in your position as someone who has competed, a former Olympic medalist, lest we forget, you must have a lot of sympathy for the athletes. I know one or two base themselves over in this part of the world, because you peak, or at least you set yourself your training schedule to peak at a certain time. Whilst I appreciate everyone is in the same boat, it's another 12 months down the line.
Yes, it is. I mean, the winter training before the Summer Games is the most intense, so they would have gone through that. I mean, in some ways, we can expect some better performances, I think, because they're going to have another winter's training now. I think psychologically, some of them found it a bit difficult, but hey, listen, they've got to come to terms with that. They've got to get out there and perform. That's what they do. That's what they do best. So I'm sure that they'll adapt. But it will be quite bizarre to go through this whole season if you're an athlete or a swimmer or a gymnast and have no competition. I don't think anybody's ever experienced that before unless they've been injured. So, they're going to have to psychologically be quite tough. But on the other hand, I think it's a great opportunity because they're going to get all that time to prepare, both physically and mentally.
8 years on from London 2012, when you look back on the legacy of those games, give us some wins, and where are you most kind of proud of some of the kind of elements that were left behind after that 3.5 weeks of that particular summer?
As I mentioned before, every one of the facilities now has a new owner. Those that were temporary have been moved on, and wherever possible, the equipment, even the sort of warm-up tracks and so on, have been used elsewhere. That was massively successful, and that was terribly important because one of the key things for winning the Olympic Games for London was the fact that prior to 2012, it couldn't host the World Athletics Championships, which is done subsequently, the World Swimming Championships, the World Cycling Championships. It didn't have those sorts of facilities. It must have been the only major city in the world that couldn't have held those 3 sports World Championships. The Olympic Park has been turned into some great accommodation. The whole of that part of East London has been transformed into a great area to live, and it wasn't before. I think the one area that was a massive disappointment to me was that the government never really got behind increasing the participation, particularly amongst kids. And I think whilst the legacy from London was massive, people said, oh, why should we spend £9 billion on the Olympic Games? It would have cost that to transform the East eastern part of London, the area that's benefited most, and probably a lot more, and would have taken 20 odd years if they could have got it done. The Games did that in 7 years. I think the other thing that was fantastic, was the spirit that it left behind, all the volunteers. It's one of those moments, people say, where were you when we won the bid? What did you remember from the Games? It's a highlight of people's lives. And that, I think, to me, as Vice Chairman of the bid, was something that I foresaw was going to be really important to the country. That it would transform the UK. It would be one of those very, very special moments. And we were very lucky. The weather was with us most of the time. So people just had a great time.
Alan, with all that you've been through in your experience, let's not sugarcoat this. This current pandemic, from a sporting standpoint, is it the biggest crisis in your lifetime?
Whilst other businesses can, gradually get back to whatever the new norm was going to be, sporting events are going to take a long time, I think. The health minister here in Britain said at the end of last week, that he wanted social distancing to continue at least until the end of this year. Well, on that basis, it will be very difficult to have a lot of events, and those that do happen will have very sparse spectators, because they'll all have to be spread out. Hospitality will be very different. It's a major crisis. Whether you're a sporting body, whether you're a sports agency, you're going to have to reset your business. You're going to have to think about relaunching your business, and to adapt to the new normal. The problem is we don't know quite what the new normal is at the moment.
What does an agency now need to be doing in order, I guess, A, to stay relevant, and B, to make sure that they are still an ongoing concern in 12, 18, 24 months?
Yeah, they're going to find that very difficult if they haven't got any reserves. They're going to find that some of the commercial partners, whether it's the sporting bodies or the agencies that work on behalf of those sporting bodies, they're going to find that some of the commercial partners are going to rethink their strategy. At the moment, I'm sure all of them are saying, look, we're going to stick with it, we're going to be very supportive. But in reality, they've got to kickstart their businesses. They've got to look after their staff. So I think we'll see some commercial partners pulling out. I think we'll see some agencies going by the wayside because they haven't any reserves to keep going. I think what it will do is to make everything a bit more streamlined. I think, unfortunately, jobs will go because sports bodies and agencies will look and say, well, do we really need those people going forward? Do we really need those skill sets? But they're going to have to be very creative. They're going to have to find new ways of generating income.
If you were still the head honcho at one of these agencies, and I'm kind of taking hypothetical a little bit here, but what would have been the first thing that you would have done?
I would be working through with the team all the different scenarios for all the different clients and the events that we had. I know, for example, at London Marathon, I'm a director there. I'm not on the management team. But I know the team are doing a massive amount because London Marathon is not just the marathon, it's 7 different events, including Ride London, the 100-mile Olympic course, over 2 days over a weekend, and Swim Serpentine. And I know they've got about 20 different scenarios running for those 7 events, despite the fact that some of them, I'm sure, will just be cancelled for this year. But they're very mindful that they really want to get some sort of event away so that they don't disappoint all those people whose entries were successful this year. So I think the agencies have got to be very creative. They've got to work those scenarios through. They've got to work the finance on each of those and look at the art of the possible.
Just on that then, talking about the London Marathon, it has been rescheduled for October, as is what I know of the situation. What is the likelihood, in your opinion, Alan, that still does go ahead?
Well, until the the health minister said last week that social distancing should continue until Christmas and the New Year. I thought there was every chance that it would happen. Now I think it's very, very slim, because if social distance is there, you can't run 45,000 people. You just can't do that. You can't have the spectators. I mean, we get 750,000 people out on the roads of London. So I think the chances of the marathon itself happening are very slim. But as we've already seen, London Marathon are very creative. The team there are great. Excuse me. They created this 2.6 challenge, and I know that they're looking at what else they can do, perhaps on October the 4th, to raise money for the charities, because there are two main objectives of the London Marathon events. One is to get more people more active, and the other is to raise funds for charities. And those charities are really hurting at the moment. They're £4 billion down, they reckon, this year. And so a lot of money is going to the national health charities and being diverted away from all the other charities that are so important to us all.
Yeah, let's talk about that 2.6 challenge, if we may, because it is another wonderful initiative, as you say, trying to recoup some of the funds that are absolutely vital for charities, not just in the UK, but further afield as well. 2.6 challenge, give us the nuts and bolts of it, if you may, Alan.
It was created by two people, one of whom was Hugh Brasher, the director of the London Marathon events. And it had a number of objectives. One was to bring the nation together again. The second was to raise funds for the charities. The third was to get more people more active during lockdown. And the fourth was for people to have fun, which was so important. And it was based on 2.6, the mile distance of the marathon, or 26. And so you could do 26 minutes of activity, and we left it to everybody to be as creative as they wanted to be, to make it as fun. And so, some people just ran 2.6 miles or kilometres, or cycled 26 miles. Other people did juggling or keepy-uppy for 26 minutes, or stood on their hands and walked around on doing handstands for 26 minutes. And to raise funds for their favourite charities. So we'll never know we will know in about 3 months' time how much money that raised, because a lot of money went direct to the charities. But I think the money that's gone in directly is about 8 million already. But I expect the final figure will be about 25 million.
We know these are challenging times. Are you, I guess enthused would be the wrong word, but are you optimistic that sport will ride this out and be a better place? And I particularly look at the sponsorship realm, because we see huge sums have been spent through brands, by brands in sport. Will that continue? How do you see that kind of landscape looking in the coming months?
I mean, you're right. A lot of money is spent by brands, but of course, most money is spent by television, and I think television will still want the big events. And providing those events survive, television, I'm sure, will be there to cover them. So yes, I think eventually we will be back to some sort of norm. The question is, what happens in between whiles? How do those events survive? How do those governing bodies survive? How many of those commercial partners remain there?
Has anyone stood out for you over the course of the past 6 weeks where you've thought that they're being proper active, they're doing things well? Maybe a bit unfair of me to ask that for a name on the spot, but anyone or any entity that you would doff your cap to?
The major events people who came together to create the 2.6, because that was done in about 10 days. And was major, led by London Marathon particularly, but not exclusively. I can't say just how impressed I was at the work that they did, the speed at which they did it, and the professionalism that they showed. So I don't think any of the other agencies have had a chance to do anything really, because we've all been in lockdown, so there's been no events.
Finishing off, Alan, with a final few for you. When you look back on your career, I mean, what is the, I guess, achievement that you're most proud of? And maybe we can break it down into agency world. I mean, best brand property, is there one in particular when you look back you think that was really good, I really enjoyed working on that?
There were a number. One that stands out because it was probably the first big one after the National Fun Run, was that an advertising agency came to me and said, look, we represent Rotary watches. Somebody convinced them to go into Formula One last year. They spent a massive amount of money and only got onto the starting grid once, and I don't think the car finished. What can you do to help? We want to establish the brand. Those were the days of brand awareness, being a lead part of sponsorship and sports marketing. But we want it to be the right image, and we put a portfolio together led by what became the major Grand Prix meeting. I mentioned the Borough Road event that morphed itself into the Rotary Watches International. And that was a major event, one of the two what we would now call Diamond League events that were held at the time. But I also created from scratch the Rotary Watches Ice International, which overnight became one of the top 3 events in the world, with 3 nights of BBC television. And for a dozen years we followed initially Olympic gold medalist John Curry, and then Robin Cousins, and then Torvill Dean. And that transformed the exposure of ice skating here in the UK. Sadly, on neither of those events did the national governing body really capitalise upon the opportunity that the massive exposure gave them. But I'm afraid that's the way governing bodies were, and sadly some still are.
Just listening to you there, Alan, I must say it's a bygone age where creative ideas, you take them to the BBC or ITV or whatever the major broadcast house, and they roll with those ideas. It seems to me that we have moved so far away from that now. That level of innovation, I appreciate it's now attributed to different areas, but it really is quite remarkable that different ideas with regards to sport was then being transferred onto national TV. Does that make you sad that we don't really see that now?
I think it's harder now because, and that's why I said I'm glad I'm not in the industry anymore, because, lots of the ideas have been thought of, and because despite the fact that one of the major changes is that we've got so many more television stations now and broadcasters around the world, all of whom are, or many of whom are looking for big sports events or interesting sports events. And so you can be creative around that. And I think we're still seeing it. I don't think the rate of change will be what it was, because it was all new, it was all different. And we were, it was a clean sheet in those days. But that creativity is still there, and I have absolute faith that the industry will come up with new and different ideas. They're going to need to.
Is there one piece of advice that you've received that's stayed with you today? A little motto that you've lived your professional life by, perhaps?
Well, the motto I always lived by was work hard, play hard, and that's what I always instilled in both the agencies, and I think we did that quite well. I was, although it wasn't a personal remark to me, I always lived by the Gary Player quote, which I'm sure people know, which was when he was asked whether he wasn't lucky on the 14th green or whatever with the shot there. He said, it's quite bizarre because I found that the harder I practice and the harder I train, the luckier I get. And I think that's a great motto for anybody. Work hard and you make your own luck.
Alan Pascoe, it's been an absolute pleasure, as it was the first time I met you, to listen to you over the course of the past 35 minutes or so. Bless you, sir. Thank you so much for taking the time out to speak to Sports Industry Insider. Alan Pascoe, former Olympic medalist, a man who has created 2 sports marketing agencies, and he still finds the time to be a director for the London Marathon as well. Alan, thank you so much.
Chris, thank you. It's a pleasure. Great to see you, and look forward to seeing you out there in the UAE before too long.